More than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees have been released as part of Phase 1 of the ceasefire deal with Israel. On Saturday, over 300 people were returned to the occupied West Bank, Gaza, or deported to Egypt. Many have spoken about the months and years they've spent in Israeli custody, and stories continue to emerge of abuse, deprivation, and torture.
Praise be to God, I have been granted release. I have spent an entire year in detention, enduring immense suffering and hardship. But praise be to Allah, who granted us blessings despite the oppression, the difficult conditions, the fear, the abuse, and the torture. We were subjected to food deprivation and humiliation.
Palestinian prison groups have issued an urgent warning about the fate of thousands of prisoners in Ofer military prison in the occupied West Bank, after the Israeli Prison Service said it had stormed detainee cells. An Israeli spokesperson said that prisoners began banging on doors during a military unit's tour of the prison. The Palestinian Prisoners Society says Israel is carrying out a large-scale repression operation, including beating prisoners and firing tear gas. There are more than 10,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. Human rights groups have previously accused Israel of violent abuse in Ofer prison. Malena Ansari is an Israel and Palestine researcher at Human Rights Watch. She monitors and reports on human rights conditions and abuses in Israel and Palestine, and she joins me now from occupied East Jerusalem. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I know that you have been studying this for several years. How do the number and nature of arrests that we're seeing now, particularly, say, in the occupied West Bank, compare to what we have seen in previous years?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. If we just take a look at numbers, the numbers have skyrocketed. We're not talking about a few thousand more. We're talking about double and triple the number. If I just look at the total number of Palestinian prisoners and detainees so far as the beginning of February 2025, we're talking about 9,846 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. And from this number, there are 3,369 under administrative detention, which basically means 3,000 are in detention without charge, without trial, and for an indefinite time. But in addition to this type of administrative detention, there's 1,800 plus detainees under what Israel calls the unlawful combatants law, which is basically also administrative detention, no charge, no trial, but for Palestinians in Gaza. And before October 2023, the number of unlawful combatants wasn't more than 10 detainees. And now we're talking about 1,800. And for administrative detention, before October 2023, we were talking about 500 administrative detainees, or maximum 800. Now we're talking about 3,300 plus administrative detainees. And basically, this type of detention is unlawful detention because, again, you're not submitting any charges against a person, and there's no trial happening for the person unless it is for renewal of their administrative detention. And why administrative detention is also unlawful, although it's legal under international law, but the way the Israeli authorities use administrative detention, it's indefinite detention without charge, based on what they call secret information. It's not even a secret file or a specific intelligence. It's basically to detain someone for a precautionary measure, in case in the future they may or might impose a security threat on the state of Israel. So we're talking about almost half of the Palestinian prisoners and detainees currently in Israeli custody are held without charge and without trial. And the issue is lawyers as well have a difficult time, presenting these detainees, because the Israeli military prosecutor or the Israeli prosecution in general does not provide the Palestinian or the lawyers in general any information about the reasons of detention or arrest. So even the detainees are in a constant state of unknowing. Will their detention be extended? Will they be released? There's absolutely unknowing or uncertainty to their future or their conditions.
I want to ask you, forgive me for interrupting you, but I want to ask you, because you brought up a an important point earlier on. In terms of the criteria for administrative detention and other types of arrest in Israel, it used to be the case, if I understand it correctly, that at least in the past, at some point in the past, there were certain criteria that had to be met in order to qualify, if you like, to be arrested under administrative detention. Can you describe to us how, if at all, those have changed over the years?
In a sense, it's not really quite accurate to say there were certain requirements to when someone goes into administrative detention. I've been a lawyer for prisoners' rights for some time now, and it's really ambiguous. Even the lawyers have no understanding what it is. It's exactly this. It's the law itself says Israel has the right to detain someone if they believe in the future they may pose a security threat to the state of Israel, and that's basically it. Even as lawyers, in cases of administrative detention, we don't get to see what the secret information is. And you know, when they say, when the military prosecutor, for example, says secret information, this could be basically anything that is not actually a crime. But to tell you the difference, what has been the difference is, for example, the periods of detention without trial or charge. If I take the unlawful combatants, which is administrative detention for Palestinians in Gaza. So people before October 2023, they would be detained, and within 96 hours, a detention order should be issued. But after October 2023, the Israeli parliament changed the periods in order for someone to be detained for up to 45 days without even issuing an administrative detention order. And for the period of judicial review, so when a court or a judge reviews this detention order, they changed it from 14 days to more than 75 days. And it could be a video conference, like not actually the detainee to be physically present in the court. And this is important because when we physically see the detainees, we're able to witness ourselves signs of torture, signs of beatings, but that has also changed. And another example of periods changing, it's the denial of meeting with an attorney or a lawyer. It used to be 10 days, and now we're talking about 75 days of detainees not being allowed to see their lawyers. And this was the case of Dr. Hussam Abu Safiyyeh, a renowned Palestinian doctor from Gaza who was detained and is still being detained, where the Israeli authorities lifted the ban on meeting his lawyer only a few days ago. And for a long period of time, we had no idea what the situation is for Dr. Hussam Abu Safiyyeh.
I want to ask you about the situation with regards to legal representation, because you say that there are, at least in some cases, there are periods where legal representatives are able to be in touch with Palestinians who've been arrested under administrative detention. What is your understanding of the success rate of bringing some sort of legal reaction or response to an administrative detention? What is the rate at which any sort of representation can be brought successfully against an administrative detention which has been done incorrectly?
You know, even if we want to talk about success rates of lawyers meeting the detainees, at the end of the day, you know, the conviction rate in Israeli military courts is 99.7%. So almost all cases that go through Israeli military courts end up with a sentence and a charge. And this says a lot about the Israeli judicial system, whether it's the military system or the civil system, when it's prosecuting Palestinians. And this is not a statistic I've created off the top of my head. This is what Israeli human rights organizations like B'Tselem, Hamokaid, and Yeshdin, who follow up on cases of Palestinian detainees, have said that the judicial system is basically whitewashing Israeli crimes and allowing it to detain more Palestinians. You know, in the last month alone, more than 20 Palestinians were arrested. There's mass campaigns happening on a daily basis in the West Bank, let alone what was happening in the Gaza Strip when Israeli forces were on the ground detaining and arresting people. So unfortunately, it's not only about whether the lawyer can meet the detainee, it's about the whole system. The whole system is built in order to keep Palestinians inside detention, inside Israeli custody, and to get them the highest sentences possible. So for throwing a stone, Israeli military orders say someone can get a sentence up to 10 years imprisonment for throwing a stone simply. And if that stone hits a moving vehicle like a military jeep, it can get someone up to 20 years of imprisonment. Let alone, arrests based on civil and political rights, like the parliamentarian Khalida Jarrar, who was recently released during the exchange deal. Khalida was under administrative detention, and this was not her first administrative detention. She has been repeatedly under administrative detention solely for her political role as a Palestinian parliamentarian.
Malena
So
Ansari,
again,
I'm really sorry. We're going to have to leave it there, but we're very grateful to you for being with us on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.